Governance, risk, and compliance, GRC, keeps a business trusted, certified, and allowed to operate. But the day to day reality is far messier than the certificate framed on the wall suggests. Let's spend a day with the person who actually lives it, a GRC specialist. First, the basics. GRC ties three things together: governance, the policies and accountability that steer the organization; risk, spotting and managing what could go wrong; and compliance, proving with evidence that we meet the rules and standards we're held to. In practice, frameworks like ISO 27001, SOC2, and PCI-DSS turn all of that into audits and a constant demand for evidence. Here's the gap our specialist lives in. To the rest of the business, compliance is a badge on the website. We're ISO 27001 certified, one clean line in a sales deck. But behind that single badge sit hundreds of individual controls, dozens of teams, and thousands of pieces of evidence. And all of it has to be gathered and kept current all year, every year, not just before the audit. Which brings us to the first and biggest challenge: collaboration. The specialist will tell you their job is about 90% chasing other people. The evidence they need, a configuration, an access review, a screenshot, a log, lives with dozens of busy teams, and for those teams, compliance is never the top priority. So a simple request gets chased for weeks. The GRC team carries the responsibility, but rarely the direct authority. What helps? Naming control owners inside every team, making evidence a routine task rather than an annual scramble, and getting genuine executive sponsorship so those requests actually get answered. The second challenge is that the technology now moves faster than the audit. The cloud broke the old way of working. In Azure, AWS, and a sprawl of SaaS apps, infrastructure spins up and changes by the hour, so a screenshot taken this morning is already out of date by lunchtime. There are hundreds of cloud controls, changing constantly, and manual evidence collection simply cannot keep pace. What helps is pulling evidence straight from the cloud provider's APIs, monitoring controls continuously instead of at a single point in time, and using infrastructure as code so the configuration is auditable by default. That pressure is creating a whole new discipline: GRC engineering. Manual evidence collection doesn't scale, spreadsheets and screenshots buckle under the volume, and auditors increasingly want live, queryable proof rather than a static document. So the role itself is changing. Modern GRC needs real technical skill. The shift is towards automating evidence collection with code and APIs, using a compliance platform as the single source of truth, where controls are mapped once, and the evidence behind them is collected automatically. The fourth challenge: the scope never stops growing. Management keeps expanding what must be certified. Add the new product to the ISO scope, bring in the new region, the new data center, the new legal entity. Every one of those expansions quietly adds more systems, more controls, and more evidence to collect. What helps is treating scope as a living, governed decision rather than an afterthought, onboarding every new system to the control set from day one, and baking compliance considerations into the planning instead of discovering them later. And the sharpest version of scope growth is mergers and acquisitions. The company acquires another business, and overnight the specialist inherits an entire environment they've never seen. Different controls, different tools, an unknown security culture, sometimes a different maturity level entirely. Merging two compliance worlds while keeping the existing certificate valid is genuinely brutal. What helps is doing security and compliance due diligence before the deal closes, setting a realistic integration runway, and openly risk accepting the gaps while you remediate them, rather than pretending they aren't there. Underneath all of this runs a structural problem: silos. Every team works in its own cell, with its own products, tools, and processes. There's no single shared view of where the organization actually stands on controls. The same piece of evidence gets requested 5 different ways, and the left hand often doesn't know what the right hand just patched. What helps is a common control framework that every team maps to, one GRC platform shared across the organization, and building a cross-team compliance community. So GRC isn't a lonely office sending nagging emails. There's a quieter challenge hiding inside all this. The evidence itself is a mess of formats. It arrives as screenshots, Word documents, PDFs, exported reports, and email threads, scattered across shared drives, inboxes, ticketing systems, and chat. Often with no version, no date, and no clear owner, so you can't even be sure a given screenshot is still current. Just wrangling all of that into one consistent in-date auditor-ready set eats days out of every cycle. What helps is a single evidence repository where every item is tagged to its control, date, and owner, capturing evidence in a consistent format and preferring artifacts pulled straight from systems over hand-taken screenshots. All of these pressures converge on one event, the audit, and the audit gets harder every single year. Standards tighten, auditors dig deeper, and they increasingly want to see evidence sustained across the whole year, not a tidy snapshot captured during audit week. A single stale or missing control can stall an entire certification. What helps is staying always audit ready, rather than cramming at year end, running internal pre-audits to catch gaps early, and continuous monitoring so nothing quietly drifts out of compliance. To see why that matters, picture the crunch, an organization that only gathers evidence at the last minute. The weeks before the audit become a frantic all-hands scramble, chasing dozens of teams at once, discovering half the evidence is already out of date, and surfacing gaps with no time left to fix them. The GRC team runs on fumes, and the whole thing feels like luck rather than control. It's exhausting, and it's avoidable. Because the fix isn't working harder during audit week. It's changing when the work happens. This is the shift from point-in-time compliance to continuous compliance. Instead of cramming once a year with manual screenshots, always behind, evidence is collected automatically and continuously. The organization stays permanently audit-ready, and configuration drift is caught early. While it's still small, the audit stops being a crisis and becomes a confirmation of what you already knew. Compliance turns into an everyday habit rather than an annual event. So what actually makes continuous compliance possible? Tooling. A GRC platform becomes the single source of truth. Instead of evidence scattered across email, shared drives, and spreadsheets, and the same control proved 5 separate times for 5 different frameworks, you map each control once and reuse it across ISO 27001, SOC2, and the rest. The platform pulls evidence automatically through integrations and gives you live dashboards and an auditor portal. The audit becomes something you share from a screen, not something you scramble to assemble. And for the cloud specifically, there's CSPM, Cloud Security Posture Management, where hundreds of cloud settings drift silently every day, and a manual screenshot is stale on arrival. CSPM continuously scans Azure, AWS, and GCP against benchmarks like the CIS standards. It automatically maps each finding to the relevant ISO, SOC 2, or CIS control, gives you live, exportable evidence, and alerts you the moment a configuration drifts out of compliance, instead of discovering it at audit time when it's too late. Together, a GRC platform and CSPM turn evidence collection from a manual hunt into an automated, always-on feed. So, to recap, GRC is governance, risk, and compliance working together. Most of the specialist's job is collaboration, not paperwork. The cloud demands automated evidence, which is why GRC engineering is rising. Scope, and especially mergers and acquisitions, keep expanding the work. Silos are the structural enemy, and the real answer is going continuous instead of last minute. Above all, remember this: compliance is a team sport. When everyone helps the GRC team a little, all year round, audit week stops being a crisis, and that certificate on the wall finally means what people think it means.